Hi everyone, this is Rob Watson, Module Leader for TECH3501, and this is the overview video of the topics that we'll be covering in Lecture 10, which is about intercultural competence. And we've been looking over the last few weeks about the notion and the idea of what and how we can enhance and support and develop our understanding of people who come from different cultures. And we all have some personal experience that we can draw on from that, but also we might need to put this into like a shared academic experience. So these are conversations and discussions that take place around the world between different academics and practitioners who want to facilitate and support and enhance people's capability to communicate across cultural boundaries and cultural differences in a positive way and in an inclusive way, rather than a conflicting or a segregated kind of way. So what we're going to look at in this lecture is what is meant by competence, intercultural competence, and some of the definitions that have been used to define what is meant by intercultural competence. And so this will be about kind of looking at culture and behaviour and kind of how people enact. What are the cues that we need to look for? What are the signs? What are the gestures what are the behaviours that we need to think about in order to recognise that somebody's viewing this issue in a different way than we would assume that we are viewing this issue, or we would assume that they might view this issue if they thought like us. How do we know, and how can we be certain that everybody sees the world in the same way? One of the reasons I'm drawn to the earlier use of the Myers-Briggs type indicators, the 16 personalities, is because it really does demonstrate that we don't all see the world in the same way. We are drawn to different dispositions and different outlooks in which we view the world. We think about the future, the past, the present in very different ways. We think about our role with others in very different ways. Some of us are very outward engaged, some of us are more inwardly engaged. And does this translate into cultural identity as well, is probably a good question that we can ask as a follow-on. So things like, how do emotions differ across different cultures? I'm going to play some videos that hopefully relate this. How do we define different goals and drives? How do we kind of, our motivations, how are they driven? The kind of use of language, the linguistic cultural references, how do they help shape and define the activities and the kind of the things that we want to achieve as we engage with people who come to problems and issues with different kinds of mindsets? So how do we develop an interactive process which doesn't make stereotypical assumptions but applies the kind of correct, respectful, comprehensible sense of social judgments? Because we all make social judgments. We can't not do that. It's almost impossible for us to be completely objective and completely open. That's not possible. We're all defined in the culture that we are established. We might cross some of the boundaries on occasions, but we might not recognise the shifts and the changes even within our own culture as well. So it's kind of you can be alienated in your own culture at the same time. So what are the kind of behaviours that kind of make this possible? What are the kind of things that we look to in terms of people's perceptions? How do people adapt to different challenges? How do you demonstrate competence given the situations change and vary so much? What kind of skills do you need? What kind of mindset do you need in order to be able to develop your abilities to communicate and engage with people from different cultural backgrounds? So the kind of notion of intercultural competence, I think, is going to be very increasingly important. And maybe as a nation we've failed to invest in intercultural competence, and that it's something that we should be doing more of, because we've become a bit more isolated in our post-Brexit kind of worldview, and that kind of just speaking English is enough. Well, those days are over really. The kind of hang on to empire and Britain ruled the waves and all that kind of nonsense is really something which is time to reject and to leave behind, because we need to be doing things in a smarter way, in a more developmental way, where we respect the contribution that other people from other cultures will make to our collaborations and to our engagements. So we kind of think, so what are the the dimensions for cultural competence, intercultural competence? What are our personal attributes? How do we think about ourselves, our self-concept? How do we disclose? How do we reveal who we are? When is it appropriate to be emotional? When is it appropriate to refrain from being emotional? How do we deal with uncertainty? How do we measure our self-awareness of how we're coming across? Some cultures are brasher than others and don't don't observe and listen before making pronouncements, whereas other cultures are very careful about making observations before they interject, because you don't want to offend somebody, or you don't want to kind of lose face with somebody if you get it wrong. So our cultural awareness requires a certain level of psychological adjustment. It requires a certain amount of change within ourselves that enables us to step back and to draw on the funds of knowledge that we have, but at the same time to apply the skills that we have in communicating in different contexts, and what those components might be. So we kind of we want to get to the point where we've got a toolkit, a kind of a sense of something which will enable us and help us. And there's a couple of models that we'll look at. There's the basic model, and there's the DIE model of intercultural communication, which we'll briefly look at. And hopefully we've got some videos and some material to watch, so it's not just a rattle through as components from a chapter. However, the notes are up on the DMU Commons wiki. You can access that from wiki.our.dmu.ac.uk. Just look for the TECH3501 section, and I'll see you at the lecture.